Check out the move in Taiwan Semi, jumping nearly 2% after a bullish call from Morgan Stanley. Analysts reiterating an overweight rating in the stock and say they expect the company to beat estimates when they report earnings on the 14th. All right, but not everyone is sweet on semis. Your next guest is warning of a potential breakdown ahead. Let's go off the charts with Chris Verrone of Strategas, a Baird company. Chris, what do you see?
Yeah, I think it's interesting. Given all the bullishness on the semis, I just think we need to acknowledge, even as the market has rallied here over the last number of weeks, the semis really haven't participated in that move as leaders, right? And I think our big call or our big view is the nature of leadership is changing right now. And I think you see that with the lack of any relative performance coming from the semi group. So I brought along a couple slides. I think the first one just speaks to the narrowing that we've seen in this sector. You've had a good rally off the lows, but still only about 30 or 35% of the semis are actually above their 200-day moving average. So there's been damaged trends. I think it takes time to repair those trends, of which we have not done enough of. And then I think secondly, when you consider the relative performance profile, our second chart here is just the SOX, the semi index, relative to the S&P. I mean, this looks to be topping, and the longer-term momentum work has also begun to roll over. So if we look at three individual names that I think capture this, you mentioned Taiwan Semi. I understand the fundamental upgrade, but the chart is not justifying it. I mean, this is a stock that remains below the 200-day. The bounce has been tepid at best. There's been no momentum behind it, and the relative strength is poor. And then if we go to another name like an AMD, the chart is weak. It's a relative laggard. It's bounced, but bounced into resistance. It's below the 200-day. And then lastly, I think the bellwether in the group that we really need to watch here is AMD. I mean, this has been a leader for a long time. It's actually starting to falter. This $100 level, $105 level is major, major support. I think that has to be a really important line in the sand for the bulls, particularly given the loss of relative performance for these stocks. So I'm more skeptical here on the charts of what the semis are telling us.
So, Chris, we often say semis are cyclical and they're an indicator of the economy. They lead the stock market. And so does this have broader implications in terms of where you see the S&P going?
So this morning, the title of our client note was, we've lost the banks, we've lost discretionary, and we're worried we're losing semis. So yes, I think it does. When you look at the very cyclical components of equity leadership, I mean, the banks are at 52-week relative lows. Discretionary has been weak since October, November. I don't think we want to see what happens if this market loses semis as well. There's clearly been a very defensive shift to leadership. You see it with software outperforming semis. You see it with the strength in utilities. You've seen it with what we've seen with the staples and the REITs. So I think at the margin, the nature of leadership here is certainly getting more defensive, and I think it stays that way.
Can you give us a glimpse as to what we might see if we lose semis here?
Yeah, this has been, think about it this way. We've rallied the triple Qs 17 or 18% off the lows, but we still only have 40% of stocks above the 200. I mean, that is a weak bounce internally. I think we're in a big range here. I wouldn't be shocked if at some point this summer we went back to the S&P lows, but I think what you really have to focus on is what is leadership and what is not. The banks are not leadership. Discretionary is not leadership. Semis are not leadership. That is the big change.
Chris, always nice to see you. Thank you. Chris Verrone of Strategas. Dan Nathan, I feel like, he's singing your song.
First things first, I think we have to work with Chris of renaming some of those titles for their client notes. That one seemed a bit long. But I'll say this about the semis in general here. The way Micron acted last week after they guided up and they put up a good quarter, and the stock initially was trading up in the aftermarket, and it's traded down like $10 since then. So that wasn't great. And, this call by Morgan Stanley on Taiwan Semi is really a short-term tactical call. If you read the note on earnings, they're basically saying the stock has acted so poorly. If they're just able to come in line and guide up a little bit, the stock's going to pop. That's not a ringing endorsement for this thing. I would say if it's not fantastic, then the stock is likely to retest those recent lows.
Yeah, Chris mentioned the loss of leadership from AMD. Interesting call, given its big purchase today, $2 billion purchase of Pensado. Guy?
Makes you wonder, are they looking for growth now? And it's interesting. I know you were thinking this when Chris was talking. He was clearly channeling his inner Robert Duvall when he was saying, if we lose the banks, the same way Robert Duvall said to Sonny, if we lose the old man, you make the deal. I know that was going through your head, Mel. It was certainly going through mine. I'll say this, if we lose AMAT, A-M-A-T, at this 125 level, which has been sideways since last spring, outside that little false breakout, that could be problematic. AMAT, surprisingly, may be the name you have to watch very carefully over the next couple of weeks.
Go ahead, Karen.
No, go ahead.
Okay, well, quickly, I don't think we've lost the leadership of the transports, and I think that's some part, and we've talked about rails, we've talked about where you're getting some of the shippers. I rarely disagree with Chris. I actually think that the semis let us off the bottom. I thought it rallied 20% to the Q's 17 to the S&P's 12, and I've seen it outperform the market by 4% during that period. So I don't think it's off to the races on semis, but I think the reaction you got off an oversold market was exactly the one you wanted out of semis.